started here. Invited Aric Turner, 70 Aric Turner here to teach a class on the geography of the Book of Mormon based on the Book of Mormon itself. He has a class that's very comprehensive. I took it 15 years ago, and I really enjoyed it at a reunion. But he's added some things to it, and I think it is well worth our being here and giving him our undivided attention for it. He can see you, and I'm going to be in the back with a mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. He'll look up, and then I'll give you the mic, and then he can hear you. It's important to know that what he is teaching here is going to be published, so if we can keep it in an orderly fashion, then this can be a blessing to many other people as we publish it on YouTube. So it's not just for the people here, it's for anybody that we want to share this with on YouTube in the future. We can share it with anybody we want. So like I said, if you have any questions, raise your hand, and then I'll bring you the microphone, and he can hear, and the recording will hear, and all of those things. So I'll go ahead and open us up with prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are grateful for this very beautiful day and the cool breeze and the air and the sunshine that is giving us life. And we thank you for those blessings. We thank you for this opportunity to be here and to bask in your spirit. And we pray that you would be with Aric as he teaches and be with us as we hear, so that we might understand, and that this class would not only be a blessing to us, but would be a blessing to others in the future. And I pray all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, let me share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, wonderful to be here. Yeah, David mentioned that I gave this class 15 years ago. Actually, I've changed the class a bit. I've added a bit more detail in some areas. So let's go ahead and get started. The first class first session that I teach is going to talk about some basics and just some things to look for with any model that anybody proposes for the Book of Mormon geography. And let's see if I can. Okay. So really what we're looking at in the Book of Mormon is information that is internally consistent. Between any two places, you can draw a line, and that line describes two directional relationships. One relationship indicates that one place is northward or southward of the other place. So, in this case, B is north of A. And the other relationship indicates if one place is westward or eastward of the other place. In this case, B is east of A. Okay. In the Book of Mormon, you can actually identify 173 places in the New World. And in this, when I say the New World, I'm referring to after crossing the ocean, or what's in the Book of Mormon is called the Great Deep. And mind you, each line has two relationships: a north-south relationship and an east-west relationship. And out of those 173 places, that means that there are a possible 29,756 relationships. That's a lot of relationships. In other words, there are 29,756 possible opportunities for the Book of Mormon to be wrong. And when I mean by wrong, I mean conflicts in relationships that don't match the same north, south, east, west directions of references to relationships in another verse. So if you think about being in a physical place, it's impossible to have one place, one relationship that says that A is north of B and another relationship that says A is south of B. In the real world, A is either north or south of B, and all relationships must be consistent regarding that relationship. So in the Book of Mormon, we have over 29,000 possible opportunities for relationships to be described as in conflict. And for the Book of Mormon to be real, every relationship has to be correct. That means that no mountain, no river, no pass, no lake, uh, no geography can be described as out of place. And that includes all of the cities, that they can have no conflicting north, south, east, west relationships. Um, Give me just a second. Okay, here I had captions on my side, and they were starting to conflict with the word. Oops. Okay. All right. Okay. The Book of Mormon consists of 8,701 verses. That's in the RLDS versification. It has 267,851 words. And there are 445 verses that I can find that discuss something unique about the geography. There are certainly other verses that duplicate information in other verses. I don't count those. So there are 445 verses that discuss some unique aspect of the geography in the New World, and 91 verses that discuss geography in the Old World. So there are just many opportunities for the Book of Mormon to be wrong about the geography. And what I have found uh, is that there are no inconsistencies in the relationships among those 173 places. That in itself is a proof of the Book of Mormon. You know, Joseph Smith took, just a few months to translate it. And for somebody to be able to keep 173 places in their head and be entirely consistent with how those places are being referenced, I don't think that's humanly possible. When you boil it down, this is from an internal model, and an internal model just puts things in relationship of one to another. These are the places in the northern parts of the Book of Mormon lands. We have Hill Cumorah up here, we have Hill Shim, we have the narrow neck that is depicted across here. Now, I will say that there are some references to places where they're only mentioned like once or maybe twice, and there's really not enough information to place them more than in just a general, very general location. And um, these places I have a question mark. So the places with the question mark, they are, call it, in the broad general location, but in terms of where they lie in relation to other places here, not really enough information in the Book of Mormon. Another thing that I will point out on this map is I mentioned there's 173 places. Now, some of those places are references to going over some kind of rising terrain or hilly terrain. And those are depicted here. And since they aren't given a name, I just gave them a number of all the places have a number from 1 to 173. And these places are numbered according to where they fall within the 173. We have Desolation over here. We have Bountiful over here. This is the river Sidon that comes up here. And Mulek is over here way to the east. If we take a look at the places in the central part of the Book of Mormon lands, again, we have the river Sidon is going up here. We have the Valley Gideon. We have Zarahemla here. We have the headwaters of the River Sidon in the South Wilderness depicted across the bottom here. The East Wilderness over here by the East Coast, by the Sea East. And again, you see hilly locations depicted. And I think, yeah. So I won't go into a lot of these right now, but just kind of letting you take a look at where things are in the central part of the lands. And then these are the places on the southern parts of the Book of Mormon lands. Again, we have the South Wilderness. We have Nephi here, Water of Sebus, Waters of Mormon, somewhere over here. The southern, call it southernmost places, Amulon. Oniha is somewhere also on the Sea East coast. So these are the places, all 173. And when you plot the relationships for all of these, they are all consistent within the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. That in itself, like I said, I just find amazing. All right, so we looked at an internal map, and an internal map it's like a treasure map. It has places in the correct positions, but those positions are not put on a world map. It's just a page with places in the correct positions. An external map, however, is a world map, and it has actual oceans, mountains, rivers, valleys, everything. And why is this important? Well, when deciphering pieces of information from the Book of Mormon and putting them into one picture, it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. The internal map should be created first so that you're focused on the information within the Book of Mormon itself. Many times I see geography theories where people started trying to find a place on the world, and they'll find a place in the world that fits maybe 5 or 6 relationships. But then when they start trying to put in other relationships, it doesn't really work. Um, so if you start with an internal map with the relationships between all the 173 places that are described, well, that gives you a very clear view of what you're trying to find in the world that fits that description. I should also point out that Hebrew writings include metaphors, and a metaphor that's just a description used to represent something else. The description is not a real thing. So, for example, in Psalm 11:1, it says, "In that day thou shalt come, O Lord, and I will put my trust in thee. Thou shalt say unto thy people, for mine ear hath heard thy voice. And thou shalt say unto every soul, flee unto my mountain. And the righteous shall flee like a bird that is let go from the snare of the fowler." So if you read this verse, do you ask yourself, does a mountain actually exist? That's a valid question because you have to ask that question with any geography in the Book of Mormon as well. Also in Psalm 37, Lord, by thy favor, thou hast made my mountain to stand strong. Thou didst hide thy face, and I was troubled. Again, does a mountain exist? All right, so I don't know if you expected a test coming here today, but I'm going to give you a test. Um, so the test is below are different places described in the Book of Mormon. And the test is what's real geography and what's a metaphor? And probably a more important question is how do you know the difference? So we have the waters of Sebus, that's mentioned in Alma 1238 and 1249. We have the waters of Judah, that's mentioned in 1st Nephi 6:8. We have the waters of Mormon, mentioned in Mosiah 933, 938, 965, 966, and Alma 3:4. We have the waters of Ripliankum, which is mentioned in Helaman 2:4 and Ether 680 and 682, and the waters of Shiloah, which is mentioned in 2nd Nephi 9:44. So I'll give you a moment to look at those and see if you can determine, or if you know, whether those are real geography or metaphor. So the answers are everything is real geography except the waters of Judah. The waters of Shiloah are real, but it actually requires the Bible to make that determination. There's not really enough information by itself in the Book of Mormon to determine whether the waters of Shiloah are real. But if you go to the Bible, it is described as a spring around the Jerusalem area. So then we get to call it a famous verse here. It talks about the sea north and the sea south. This is in Helaman 2:8. And it came to pass that they did multiply and spread and did go forth from the land southward to the land northward, and did spread insomuch that they began to cover the face of the whole earth, from the sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east. Right? It seems a bit strange that the sea north and sea south are mentioned in just this one verse, because the sea east and the sea west are mentioned in many other verses, 36 verses for the sea east and 40 verses for the sea west. So what can we discern from the information in Helaman 2:8? Well, it contains a reference to all four cardinal compass points. Now, if you look at all of the places, all the verses that reference four cardinal compass points, they are always metaphors. There are times when it does describe the four sides of an object, like a house, uh, very distinct, and that you can get from the Bible. So that's one piece of information that we can put together. Um, when the four cardinal compass points are included in the same verse, they are never used to describe an actual geographical place. And this holds true for both the Book of Mormon and the Bible. So we have consistency across scriptures. Also, all verses in the Bible and the Book of Mormon that use the phrase face of the whole earth use it as a metaphor to describe the extremities of the earth. In the Book of Mormon, the phrase that comes after the face of the whole earth further explains or describes what the face of the whole earth is actually saying. And this is consistent in all 8 verses where the phrase occurs. So in Helaman 2:8, the 4 cardinal points, the seas, describe how the people spread over the land. So we have the face of the whole earth from the sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east. So that is a description of what is meant by the face of the whole earth. Also, another perspective, if you actually sit and read that verse, you start wondering, okay, what about the sea south? The verse is talking about people that are going from the land southward to the land northward. So, where is the sea south? If you were to interpret this verse as real geography, why would people go north just to go south again? If there was a sea south actually in the south, the people in the land southward would have headed directly south. So, kind of an interesting way to really look at what is being said in the verse. All right, if the seas in Helaman 2:8 are indeed used as a metaphor, are there other references that support that metaphor? Well, if we take a look at 2nd Nephi, there are some verses here, starting in chapter 7 and 11 through 37. And they who shall not be destroyed shall be scattered among all nations. And it shall come to pass that they shall be gathered in from their long dispersion from the isles of the sea, from the 4 parts of the earth. For the Lord has made the sea our path, and we are upon the isle of the sea. But great are the promises of the Lord unto those who are upon the isles of the sea. Wherefore it says, isles, there must needs be more than this, that they are inhabited also by our brethren. So here we have descriptions of nations being scattered, and these nations being all around to the 4 parts of the earth, and this description of isles on a sea, and that people in the Book of Mormon describe themselves as on one of these isles. So isles are mentioned here and in other verses as metaphors for the extremities of the earth. So they're used in reference to 4 parts, 4 corners, 4 quarters. So any reference to the whole earth, that's where you get these references to the isles. And as mentioned in 2 Nephi 7:35, the seas surround the isles. So over 2,000 years ago, the known world, and we're talking the known world around Mesopotamia, was considered to be surrounded by seas, a sea east, a sea north, a sea west, and a sea south. So it begs the question of were they using a metaphor or referring to real seas? Another aspect of the seas that surround the world is that there is an island at each end or each corner of the world in the east, the north, the west, and the south. So this is a Hebrew interpretation. Other cultures around Israel used a different number of isles, but it was consistent that everybody in that area did view world surrounded by seas, and those seas had isles at the extremities. And this explains the use of isles of the sea to refer to the four corners of the world. So let's take a look at what I was just describing. Uh, this fragment is the earliest known world map. Uh, this is circa 9th century BEC from Babylonia. You can see that it has a circular whorl, and this ring around it is an ocean that surrounds the entire world. In Babylon, it was called the Bitter River. And it had seven islands at the extremities. You can see three of them here on the fragment. These are the triangles um, on the edge of the seas, if you will. The text that you see up here actually describes seven islands. But because of the damage to this particular fragment, you can only see the three, the triangle here, the triangle here, and the triangle here. There were four others down here, but because of the damage, you can't actually see those triangles. So this was the worldview of the people of Mesopotamia, 900 years, 1,000 years before Christ. Another person, Anaximander, who lived from 610 to 546 BC, had a map, provided just a little bit more description of the world, but also depicted the world as surrounded by oceans. So this is the world view, if you will, of the people in Jerusalem and Lehi leaving Jerusalem. This is what their view of the world was. And even as late as 276 to 194 BC, this person called Eratosthenes depicts the world much more detailed, but again, it even describes a northern ocean. This is Northern Ocean. There's an ocean to the west. It has the Atlantic Ocean covering everything across the south, and then there is a sea east over here. And if you read what archaeological evidence, tablets and whatnot from this period, you do get that they referred to a sea in the north, a sea to the west, a sea to the south, and a sea to the east. And their view of the Mediterranean Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, excuse me, was just an extension of the West Sea that came in close to where they're located here in Mesopotamia. They did not consider it as a separate sea. They just considered it as a, call it a large lagoon, if you will, of the West Sea. All right, so the conclusion that I've come to is that Helaman 2:8 is a metaphor. The sea north and the sea south are metaphors. The sea west and the sea east in this verse in Helaman 2:8 are also metaphors, but because there are also many other verses that do describe them as an actual sea or an ocean, they can be justified as seas or oceans. And using the grammatical analysis and also the worldview of that people had in the Mesopotamia area, this verse cannot be substantiated as physical geography. It is a metaphor that describes the whole world um, and that whole worldview that people had at the time of a world surrounded by oceans. So if someone states that the sea north or the sea south really exist, then I would ask them how they determine that they came up with a conclusion that they were real geography and not metaphors. And did they even look at it from a possibility that they could have been metaphors? And as I was going through the Book of Mormon, there are a number of phrases that can be used to help understand the geography. Lists, and I'll talk about lists a little bit more in the next couple slides. But anything that was described in a list in terms of geographical places, those places bordered each other. They were not random names in a list. There was an actual order to how they were placed in the list as they were written down. There was a distinct difference between cities and villages. Cities were walled and villages were unwalled. And that actually holds true as the same definition in the Bible. Anytime that you see an up or down, it literally means up or down in altitude. A lot of times we hear people refer to, let's say, up north, meaning a direction. That kind of connotation did not come about until about the 1600s. Maps that were drawn in the 1400s, 1500s, beginning part of the 1600s, there was no consistency with what we would call the top part of the map. It could be pointing east, could be west, could be north, could be south. It all just depended on what perspective the person in drawing the map, how they decided to draw the map. It wasn't until the 16th century that seafarers tended to start putting maps on the top part, the top part being north. Um, so, but in the Book of Mormon, up and down literally means up and down in altitude. It does not refer to any direction whatsoever. The word over means to literally go over something, a ridge, a hill. So it indicates some kind of rising terrain that had to go over. Interesting, the word across in the Book of Mormon, if you search for it, it always references to traveling over water. In the Bible, English translation is Passover, and there's actually some more kind of in-depth connection with Passover and water that you can get derived from the Bible. But I thought that was interesting that it was very consistent. Book of Mormon always used the word across. In the Bible, it uses Passover. So you will see references in the Bible to people passing over the River Jordan. A the phrase "yea even," what comes after that phrase actually describes what comes before it. So we use parentheses. Uh, Yea even is the Book of Mormon, or actually the Old Hebrew way of using parentheses. The word thence, um, that means that you have left one place to go to another place, and that indicates a boundary, which is helpful in identifying uh, boundaries of the geographical places. The word into is to go into a place from another place, so kind of the opposite of thence, but also describes a boundary. Uh, the phrase was near uh, and this is true even in the Bible, was near means that it is next to or adjacent to. So this talks about something that borders or touches together. The phrase roundabout uh, means that it's talking about a change of course. It's not a straight line, it's a change of course or something that encircles, in which case you're constantly changing course. Um, but that's what the phrase roundabout means. A fountain is actually a description of a slow, deep part of a river. Now, it could be like the springs that you might find at the head of a river, because a lot of springs, it forms a pool. It can refer to a place along the river that it slows down and you get a deep part of the river. Or it could be where the river empties into the ocean, where again, it's a very slow, deep portion of the river. But that's what a fountain means. And again, that is consistent with a fountain in the Bible as well. Seas are many waters. Um, these can be singular or plural. And I will say that many waters can refer to a single water body. Um, we it's a technique of grammar um, called a singular plural or plural singular. We do have some aspects of this in English. We can have one deer or we can have three deer. So same concept. Many waters could refer to one water, may refer to more than one water. And a wilderness is some kind of elevated terrain with little water. All right, lists of geographical places that occurs in 15 verses. Those are listed here. An example is in 2 Nephi 9:126, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush, from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. Here we have that reference to the islands of the sea again. So we know that the islands of the sea is from the extremities of the world. Same verse is found in Isaiah 11:11. And what I've plotted here is from Assyria to Egypt. At the point of time when this was written, there was no lands claiming in between. So this is Assyria actually covered this area, most of the Middle East. So it bordered on Egypt. Pathros was a separate kingdom, if you will, from Egypt at the time. So it bordered that. Cush, again, was a separate kingdom. And then reference to Elam, no kingdom claimed this area in Saudi Arabia at that time. So the border to border was from Cush to Elam and from Shinar and then to Hamath and then the islands of the sea. So if we take that to the Book of Mormon geography, we have a reference in Alma 14:13, talks about Ishmael, Medoni, Nephi, Shelam, Shemlon, Lemuel, Shimnalon. So we know that these border each other. And if you plot these on the internal map, we have that consistency: Ishmael, Madoni, Nephi, Shalom, Shemlon, Lemuel, Shimnalon. Also, Helaman 1145, Shemlon, Shalom, Helam, Amulon are mentioned in order. And in Alma 1421, we have Amulon, Helam to Jerusalem. And those are also in order. So they are consistent in how they are listed in order. All right. This we would get into criteria for evaluating models. This might be a good place to stop and pause if there are any questions up to this point.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. This might be a good place to pause the class. I have to get things set up here on my end for our 11 o'clock. So we will continue here starting the next class.
Okay. Thank you for being here this morning, Aric.
All right. We'll be again here next week.